Our recruiting analyst, Andrew Bone. He's bad to the bone, senior recruiting analyst for BamaInsider.com, part of the Rivals.com network, and he joins us every Wednesday for the latest on Crimson Tide recruiting. Unfortunately, Bone, I know Bama fans are trying to be patient. They're trying to understand all that's going on with the pandemic and so forth. But, buddy, the natives are getting restless. They want a commitment. And unfortunately, nothing's happened. Alabama still sits at one commitment for the class of 2021, and here we are almost to mid-April. What's going on, man?
Well, it's a unique situation. Obviously, that we're all in throughout the entire world right now with the coronavirus, and I just don't see a lot of kids making decisions at this point. Now, we're seeing some kids commit elsewhere, obviously, and I think Alabama fans are kind of getting upset by seeing other top programs get big commitments, and Alabama not being able to get just even one of them. And I think that's the biggest concern right there. But I think everything's going to be fine once visits start resuming. Kids start coming on campus more. I would say at least 95% of Alabama's major targets haven't made decisions yet. So, even though other programs are getting commitments right now, the majority of Alabama's top targets have not made a commitment or made a decision. And, a lot of those guys are waiting until this, the virus dies down a little bit so that they can resume taking visits. They can get to as many campuses as possible. Now, what we are seeing a little bit is recruits starting to narrow down their list of favorites. Even though Alabama's on most of those lists, a lot of these kids were going to take a bunch of spring visits. They were going to take a bunch of summer visits, whereas, they may have had, a top 15 or a top 12, going into the spring. Now they're starting to narrow it down to a top 5, a top 8, something like that. So, and we'll continue to probably see them narrow down their list even more because they're not going to be able to take as many visits as they were hoping to. They really got to focus on, the main schools that they really want to get serious about and really, get recruited by.
Well, you continue to pump out updates at BamaInsider.com. It's impressive, really, how much information you've gathered and been able to write as many stories as you have. I want to hit on some guys that you have featured in regards to Alabama that are top players from around the country. Let's start with Mason Smith out of Houma, Louisiana, 6'4", 290-pound defensive tackle, one of the top prospects regardless of position in the country. And we know how well Alabama's recruited in Louisiana. Of course, we know Ed Orgeron has really picked up LSU's efforts in the state. And, of course, obviously with Kirby Smart, Georgia has come in there. Texas A&M has always recruited the state of Louisiana, and I know Florida is involved with him as well. Can you give us a little bit of info on this top prospect and what his situation is right now?
Yeah, so so one of the things we're doing right now on BamaInsider.com is we're kind of watching some of these other regional, national recruiting analysts throughout our network that are writing stories on top prospects in terms of kind of where they see their recruitment at this point in terms of, who's at the top of the list, who are the main contenders, in their recruitment. And then we're breaking it down even further, really where is Alabama in these kids' recruitment? Are they, is things maybe a little bit, I guess what I'm trying to say is Alabama a little bit higher on the list than even a regional or a national guy thinks so, or maybe even, not on the list. So, with Mason Smith, the regional guys, put out a list the other day, the top contenders on Mason Smith's list, and number one player in the state of Louisiana, big-time talent, number one defensive tackle in the country, and it said LSU number one, which is a big surprise, and then I think it was Florida number 2, number 3 was Georgia, and then number 4 was Alabama. Now, kind of what we've been hearing for the last, I would say, year, because he's been recruited for a long time, is that it was going to end up being an Alabama-LSU battle. And I continue to think so. I still think it's an Alabama-LSU battle with him. He just needs to get back to campus. He needs to get back to Tuscaloosa. Hasn't been in a few months. Hasn't been since the football season, so they need to get him back on campus. He was supposed to visit Tuscaloosa late March, early April, sometime around then, and obviously was not able to do so. But he's definitely a big-time target for Alabama. He's got a great relationship with the coaching staff, Pete Golding, also Freddie Roach, who recruited him when he was at Ole Miss. So he's got some good connections there. I think the biggest thing with him, just getting him back on campus, spend time with the coaching staff, whenever that may be, whenever it's safe for everyone. But I definitely think that Alabama is extremely high on his list, and he's certainly right at the top of Alabama's wish list in this 2021 recruiting class.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with the job you did, taking all this information from the different analysts and putting it together. And we don't want to give it all away. We want people to go to BamaInsider.com and read some of it. But obviously, Mario Williams, if you follow Alabama recruiting, is a guy that you've been hearing about. The recruiting that Alabama has done in the state of Florida for receivers has been phenomenal over the last 7 or 8 years. So clearly, Williams is a guy. Maybe this isn't fair because of how good Waddle is, but because of the size, 5'10", 165, I've heard some people compare him to Jalen Waddle. What do you know about Mario Williams?
Well, he's certainly one of the top overall players in the country. I think he's rated in the top 20 overall on Rivals.com and in the Rivals 100. And he's certainly been a big-time target for the Crimson Tide for a very long time. Extremely explosive, has excellent speed, can take it the distance pretty much anywhere on the field. And, as of right now, in his top 3 contenders, list as of right now, it looks like it's Oklahoma, Florida, and Alabama. Alabama's kind of been right there in the mix, very high on his list for a very long time. And he's one of those other kids that really need to get him back on campus because it's extremely important for these out-of-state kids to get back on campus and spend time with the coaching staff, spend time on campus. Get familiar with the football program. But, he's definitely a top priority for the Crimson Tide. This is a big year for wide receiver recruiting for Alabama. I think they probably need to sign at least 4 receivers in this class. They signed a pretty good receiver class last year, but I think they could have added at least one more guy. So this year, getting probably 4 guys on board at the receiver position, I think is extremely important. And getting someone like him, getting a big-time talent, a 5-star caliber player, a couple 5-star caliber players. That would be great if Alabama could do that. And like you said, they've had a lot of success recruiting receivers in the Sunshine State. It really started with Amari Cooper when he got on board, and then obviously Jerry Jeudy and Calvin Ridley. Those type of guys. Coming to Tuscaloosa and having this type of impact that they've had has certainly opens up the eyes for a lot of kids, especially in South Florida, to join the Crimson Tide program.
You got, as I said, profiles a number of these different guys that Alabama's recruiting, but let's get to the guy that we've discussed here before, Bone, because he's an in-state player. He's a tremendous athlete from over at Hanley High School in Roanoke, Dillon Brooks, outside linebacker, defensive end, pass rushing type. That's just up the road from Auburn, really. It's not that far from Tuscaloosa either, but anyway, you can just shoot straight down to Auburn and back up. And I've been hearing that Auburn is the team to beat. Is that correct? And where does Alabama stand?
Well, I do think Alabama's probably a little bit on the outside right now. Now, Chad Simmons, who covers the Southeast region for Rivals, he put a contender story out the other day for Dillon Brooks, and he actually had a surprise team as the number 1 program on his list right now, and he has LSU as the top school, followed by Auburn, then Tennessee, and then Alabama. So Alabama currently sitting in 4th position, at least to Chad. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's Dillon Brooks' top 4, top 5. That's just Chad's opinion based on his conversations with Dillon Brooks. Now, a lot of times, recruits are telling recruiting analysts who their top 4, top 5 are. They just don't want to be quoted as it. So that's what a lot of these ranking the contender stories are kind of off record. In terms of getting quotes from from these top players. But and I kind of see that with Dillon Brooks right now. I think LSU and Auburn, Tennessee probably a little bit ahead of Alabama, and I think that probably has to do a little bit more with Alabama in terms of their pursuit of him. Now, not necessarily the recent pursuit. I think over the course of the last year, I think Alabama's starting to turn up the heat with him over the last probably 2 or 3 months. Really started to increase their interest. He showed up in Tuscaloosa for Junior Day about 2 months ago, and was really impressive in his size at 6'4", 6'5", about 230 pounds. Now that's about 20 pounds bigger than he was last time he showed up in Tuscaloosa. So I think Alabama's really impressed with his size. They're recruiting him as an outside linebacker, kind of an edge rusher. And I certainly think that Alabama's going to continue to climb up his list and get more in it. But as of right now, I would say that they're kind of on the outside looking in.
Andrew Bone with us from BamaInsider.com for his weekly recruiting report. A guy that I really like that isn't as high profile as Brooks, but, Alabama and the city of Birmingham, we know the recruiting history there. But it appears, based on what I've read at Bama Insider, that Alabama kind of got off to a slow start with Jeremiah Williams, outside linebacker out of Ramsey High School, 6'4", 225. Again, I really, really like this player. Is Alabama trying to make up ground there with him, Bone?
Yes, I believe so. Jeremiah Williams, big kid, 6'4", 225 pounds. Extremely impressive looking prospect. He had a great junior season. Teammates with another big Alabama target, Tim Keenan.
That's right.
Defensive tackle, who I think is going to end up at Alabama as well. But Jeremiah Williams grew up an Auburn fan, has been to Auburn just several times. But Alabama's really turned up the heat on him. They've done a great job recruiting him. Carl Scott, Alabama DB's coach, is the area recruiter, and he does a tremendous job recruiting the Birmingham area. I think Alabama's got a great shot landing him, even though they had a really good linebacker class last year in that 2020 recruiting class. But I certainly think that Alabama is very high on his list. I think him and Tim Keenan want to play together, and I think Alabama's got a great shot to get both of those guys on board.
They're both terrific players. That would be outstanding for the Crimson Tide if they could reel both those guys in. Interesting here on Latrell McCutchen, because the cornerback out of LBJ High School in Austin, Texas, was committed to Alabama, decommitted, and a lot of times when somebody decommits, you just kind of automatically write them off. But this is a guy who missed his entire junior season with a torn ACL, but is a terrific prospect, and Alabama's still in the running here, right?
Alabama's still in the running. He committed to Alabama last summer. Pretty solid commitment. Even though he took a few visits during the fall, continued to say that he was extremely solid with his commitment, and he backed off his commitment on March 1st. One of the things we continue to hear, didn't hear it from him, but heard it from some different sources, was Scott Cochran playing a big role in his decommitment, and not necessarily Scott Cochran calling him and saying, "Hey, you need to decommit from Alabama," but more so is McCutchen looking at it and saying, I really wanted to go to Alabama because of Scott Cochran and how much he can help me. And that's why he reopened his recruitment and started looking really hard at other schools, especially Oklahoma. But we are also hearing that he's starting to become a little bit more interested in the new strength and conditioning staff. I believe they've reached out to him, and he's been in communication with them a little bit. And as soon as the dead period ends, he may try to get back to Tuscaloosa. So I think they're still in it. As of right now, I still don't expect him back in Alabama's class, but they are continuing to recruit him. Now, if he comes back for a visit, there's definitely a chance that he could, re-fall in love with Alabama, fall in love with the program, recommit. But as of right now, still leaning towards Oklahoma in terms of his final decision. But we'll see if he can make it back to campus. I think Alabama's going to have a real shot with him.
Speaking of strength and conditioning coaches, of course, Cochran departs. He goes to Georgia. Alabama brings in David Ballou and Dr. Matt Ray from Indiana, and man, got a good buzz off that with their very analytical approach to strength training. And then all of a sudden, of course, it's bad luck for everybody, but particularly I think for Alabama, bringing these two new strength coaches in. They don't get much of an opportunity to work with their guys, number one, before they all leave campus. And then I do think that UA had planned to spotlight these guys in recruiting with their science and technology approach to conditioning and strength training. And how has that been hampered? How has that effort been hampered by this pandemic, Bone?
Yeah, you're spot on in terms of saying that Alabama was really going to spotlight these guys because frankly nobody really knows about them in terms of Alabama type targets. These guys are at Indiana, so you don't get a lot of you're not getting a lot of 5-star Rivals 100 type recruits on campus. So a lot of these type guys don't know about them, and this was going to be a big opportunity for them to spend time with recruits, kind of let them know exactly how they kind of do things, how they run their show and their program. And we saw so many kids that had Alabama visits scheduled for March and April, especially with spring practice and spring game, and now all that's kind of gone away. So Alabama's kind of had to rethink some things, how they want to approach it, and what they're starting to do is starting to get these guys on FaceTime calls, on Zoom conferences with top targets, and however they can, and we talked about it last week how the Brockermeyers, Tommy and James Brockermeyer, two twins, offensive linemen out of Texas, they had a Zoom call with David Ballou the other day, and I know Dr. Ray is also speaking with. He's kind of spending more time with the speed guys, the athletes, talking to those guys. Where David Ballou is spending more time talking with the linemen, the defensive, offensive linemen, linebackers, the bigger guys. So they are talking to a lot of these guys, trying to build relationships. But I think it's very important for once the visits can resume, for recruits to get on campus and spend time with them in person rather than just talking to them over the phone.
All right, Bone. We always under regular circumstances we like to do commitment watch, and these days that's difficult. But I haven't asked you in a couple of weeks, but I will now. Commitment watch. Is there anybody on the radar that you think, despite all that's going on, might be close to pulling the trigger for Alabama or not?
Well, I think with out-of-state kids, a lot of those guys are still kind of waiting to take their visits, enjoy the process a little bit more. Terry and Arnold is probably a guy that in terms of an out-of-state kid that I'd watch out for. May not make a decision this week or next week, but potentially could make a decision in the next month or two. He's a defensive back out of Tallahassee that is extremely high on Alabama. I'm always kind of watching the in-state kids. Tim Keenan, JaQuincy McKinstry. Those are some names that continue to watch because I think Alabama really just needs some sort of recruiting boost. And you got some kids in state that you really want that have taken several visits. So if you can get one of those guys on board, at least gives you a little bit of momentum. And I think Alabama's probably pressing and hoping that somebody, at least maybe somebody in state, will go ahead and jump on board. So those are some guys that I'd keep an eye on.
Good stuff as always from Andrew Bone and Bone Bama Insider. You're continuing, as I said, to pump out information on Facebook, on Twitter. Again, give the info to the listeners on how they can track the Bad to the Bone recruiting analyst.
Yeah, you can follow me on BamaInsider.com, part of the Rivals.com network. Please join our the recruiting board where we're posting stuff every single day. You can follow me on my Twitter handle at Andrew J. Bone. You can also follow Bama Insider on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, search Bama Insider, click the link, hit subscribe, free of charge, and you can get all of our great videos that we post on our YouTube channel.
Thank you, Bone.
Thanks, Gary. Have a good one.